Greetings, everyone, and welcome once again to another Sabbath Insight. Uh, as always, I am Chief Yuya, and I want to welcome you. This subject that we're going to be speaking about, reaching down inside, as you see, is somewhat of a continuation of what we've been dealing with in terms of you, right? We spoke about the 7 deadly sins. We spoke about the dawning after, or the morning after, and what that looks like, and just really exploring self systems. We've been exploring how to sort of do some level of diagnostics and some level of surgery. Our last segment, we spoke about running away when we're running away to get to freedom, but we're actually running deeper into our cage because we're running from freedom. All right. So when we're now exploring the concept of reaching down inside, touching upon that light, that's within, and sort of integrating more of our systems and integrating more of the complements or the opposites of the 7 deadly sins. So it's sort of like we're going to some of that. There comes a time in one's inner work when the study of darkness, it's been fulfilled. And we've examined, like I said, the 7 deadly sins, and we didn't do that to condemn ourselves per se, but to understand the mechanics of imbalance. How do we end up that way? And each really so-called sin is simply a psychic current, and it's a psychic current that's lost its rhythm. Rhythm is very important. When your desire outruns your discipline, or your faith, or fear rather, is displaced, or displaces your faith, where once there was faith, you had a knowing, you had a surety, and now you've displaced that with just fear. When that happens, energy, like a black hole, it collapses inward upon itself. So the result becomes fatigue, distortion, and even congestion. So now our job as aspirants is to realign. We had this concept called the 7 noble virtues, and those virtues are not trophies. Sometimes people try to wear virtue like it's some sort of badge of honor, and it's not. Or even maybe a way to become self-righteous and look down on other people. Those noble virtues are the virtues that we should all be carrying and all be holding. They're corrective forces within your subtle anatomy. They're corrective forces. So each virtue restores a circuit within you. And sometimes, just like in any electron, because we're electrical beings, you might have a circuit that's been misused, or you could have a circuit that's been overloaded. And it just needs to be corrected. So our goal in this insight today is to understand how these currents move and how to bring them under the intelligent direction of the will, where they belong. Speaking as an instructor, I would say, remember the architecture within which we work. You are composed of layers, just like the planet Earth. You have physical layer, emotional layer, mental layer, and a causal layer, right? And your physical layer is your instrument. That's the instrument in which things are made, or things are done. And then you have an emotional layer, and your emotional layer is the field of motion. In addition to that, you have a mental layer, and the mental layer shapes and directs. It shapes and directs. Then you have what we call the causal layer, or that would be like your soul layer. And that layer, it provides purpose and it provides patterns. Okay. So when your vices dominate, your anger, your addiction, your need to be right, your need to control others, you could just go through the list of things that are, we'll say, problematic. When those vices dominate, the lower field pulls against the higher field. Okay. And when virtue is installed, your current begins to flow upward and downward in harmony. Remember, and I spoke about this in a previous segment, it's a loop. Up your spinal column, down your spinal column, up your spinal, up and down, up and down. And the flow is supposed to be one that's harmonious and not jagged or distorted, anything like that. Now, when we look at the entire system, this entire flow, right, that we have, it's the will that governs the entire system. So the will, it's a midway point between your instinct and your aspiration. You have your instinct at the bottom, then you have your will, and then at the top, you have your aspiration. So training the will is the central sacrament, I would say, of all of your spiritual work. I realized an acronym when I in my meditation today, and we'll call it IWA, right? Instincts, will, and aspirations. Together they form the living core of your character. As we know, within the Yoruba, we speak about Iwa, or I spoke about in my book, Grasping the Root of Divine Power, where I shared character is all that is requisite, right? When instincts rule the will, when your will is ruled by your instincts, then chaos governs everything. When your will aligns with your aspiration, then order returns to your system. So Iwa is your axis. It's the column that determines whether light flows cleanly through you, or you become, or that light becomes trapped inside of distortion. So Iwa is your character, but it also gives you the understanding of how that light should be moving. If we look at we spoke about the seven deadly sins and how they manifest, and um, how we learn to rebalance them. And I sort of gave a prompting that, we would at some point, of course, speak of the seven noble virtues. Let's speak about chastity, because I think chastity is one that is often confused. Chastity is not repression. Western society would have you believe that chastity is repression. Chastity is not repression, it's containment. It's a huge difference. When you are chaste or you practice chastity, what you're doing is you're practicing conservation of the life force. So every thought, every sensation carries an electrical charge, right? And when that electrical charge is scattered through excess, or it's scattered through fantasy, the current begins to weaken. Okay. So when that same charge, that electrical charge, remember, we're just energy that's governed by electricity. When that electrical charge is contained through mindfulness, and when it's contained through rhythmic breathing, the charge intensifies. That's a concentrated magnetism that rises naturally through the spinal column. And instead of becoming indulgence, it becomes illumination. Simple things that you could do, 3 measured breaths before any act of desire. Inhale, observe, transmute. It doesn't matter what it is. You could be in the line. At the line is where they really play with you, when your checkout lines. What's at the checkout lines? When I was a bit younger, there would always be tabloids there. They don't really have them anymore, but they used to have these like trash magazines where, different so-called secrets of celebrities or another alien crash somewhere, or these trash tabloids. I forget the names of them. And then you also had candy there. So you had two things when you got to the checkout line. You'd have something, the assumption is that maybe it was the maternal figure in the home that was doing the shopping. So she would be able to grab it. Ooh, Liz Taylor did this. This how long we're going back, and this one did it, or Michael Jackson admitted this or that. And she could get fix her feed, and then the child would be there begging for candy, because the candy is always low in those aisles, right where a child can grab them. So even in an instance like that, take 3 breaths, inhale, observe, transmute. So the retained energy becomes creative power. You see, that's chastity. That's chastity. When you're able to take your life force and your life force energy and that electricity, and instead of just expending it recklessly because I'm angry or I'm frustrated or whatever, you contain it for a moment and give yourself an opportunity to transmute it into something that's valuable. Then you have temperance, right? Whereas chastity governs the inner fire, temperance governs the outer vessel. So it's the science of knowing how to measure. Everything that enters the body or the mind, whether it be food, whether it be drink, whether it be thought, trash tabloid, chemical candies that they call food, but they're not really food, it's chemicals. But all of those things have a frequency. They all have a frequency. This is why I have spoken to many people over the years, whether it be after I do a live workshop or whatever, facilitation of a group meeting, a lecture. I had so many people say, "Man, Chief, I love what you did, or I love what you were talking about. I didn't understand everything, but I loved it." Because they're tuning into a frequency of healing, a frequency of authenticity, a frequency of the divine. So even if you may not understand everything that's being said, you recognize that, again, every food, drink, thought and every emotion has a frequency that's connected to it. So when we look at temperance, when we take in more that we can digest, it creates a turbulence in the etheric body. Just consider the same thing. You take in more thought than you can digest, you might get a headache. When you take in more food than you can digest, you might get a stomach ache. You'll get often signs and symptoms of what we call indigestion. You took too much in. So your moderation and your temperance is not restraint, it's rhythm. To temper yourself, you're not restraining yourself. You're finding the rhythm. One of the ways it's very important that you do when you're reading, when you're speaking, or when you're eating, breathe evenly. Breathe evenly. A lot of times when we're frustrated or we decide to allow ourselves to get upset or to be upset, you'll notice that there's a change in your breathing patterns. You may breathe more rapidly. You may hold your breath, then breathe more rapidly. Then it's all over the place. But if you're able to even your breath, like I'm doing now while I'm speaking, then you'll find that you'll come to a stronger place of clarity. So in that instance, you let your body's diaphragm becomes your metronome. A metronome is a tool that we use as musicians or even as composers, where it keeps time. It's different. Metronomes have different sounds, but a basic metronome, sometimes it's just a pendulum that goes back and forth and like click, clock, click, clock, click, clock, click, clock, click, clock, click, clock, right? And it keeps time for you. So when you're practicing, you can set your metronome to different, what we call beats per minute or BPMs. The lower the number, the lower the beats per minute. So you might set it to 60 BPM and it's going to move at a certain speed. Then you could speed it up to 80 BPM. It's going to go a little faster. 100 BPM, it's going to go even faster. 100 BPM would be like house music, right? Boom, 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 right? So if you let your diaphragm, your breathing diaphragm, let that become your metronome. So when you're reading something, and I'm exaggerating it. It doesn't have to be so, but when you're reading or you're speaking or you're eating, especially when you're eating, always try to even out your breathing. Let that diaphragm become a metronome for you. What happens is that your perceptive clarity will begin to increase, because what's going on in that moment is your inner tides, they begin to stabilize. Once your inner tide stabilize, your clarity now grows. You ever speak to someone who's upset and they're breathing all crazy, and you're trying to speak to them and they're making that because they're just looking to jump in, like while you're speaking, all they want to do is retort and jump right back at you, because their inner tide is all over the place. There's a raging tsunami that's going on inside of their system while you're trying to speak to them. So any sort of intelligent or logical thought is impossible. One of the other noble truths is charity. Charity is a reversal of the frequency or the current, the electrical current known as greed. Whereas greed contracts, charity radiates. You see that? So they're in that sense, they're opposing forces. When energy accumulates without an outlet, what happens is you develop stagnation. You have this hoarding and this accumulation of an energy, but it's not releasing anywhere. It's not going anywhere. Again, there's no charity. So in that instance, now you have stagnation. So when you're able to give of your time, give of your resources, of your attention, that opens your heart channels. That opens up channels of your heart. So as magnetism flows outward, it draws finer substances inward. So when you're giving, you're not losing. When you're giving, you're circulating. You see, to give and to show charity is to circulate. It's not to lose. Each day, perform one conscious act of giving without a witness. That single act, I promise you this, it will enlarge your aura. And it will enlarge your aura more effectively than many hours of idle meditation. This I promise you. I know this for an absolute truth. This strong, very interesting, strong for me. As I shared in the last segment, there's some challenges that are occurring for myself and my clan right now, and we're soldiering through as we do. But every single day, this strong, I helped a woman. Every single day, a woman I didn't know. It's very interesting, strong. In fact, 2 days I helped the same woman. I ran into a woman one day, not ran into, but we were in the same room. I don't know her from anything. We have no other connection, nothing. I helped her out. She was going through something really traumatic emotionally. And I, walked her through it, worked her through it, hugged her, told her she's loved, let her tear and snot all over my North Face jacket. And synchronicity would have us meet the next day. I don't know. Yeah, I do know her first name. I remember. I don't know her last name. I don't know where she lives. I don't know her. Ran into her again the next day. Helped her again. That day, I helped two more women as well. I helped one sister find an address to a place. If I played the numbers, I would probably play that address. But I don't play numbers. I can give you the number now. Break me off with a little cheese. But and then after I helped that woman, I paid for another one's fare. Really elder, short, little tiny elder sister. I don't know how old she was, but she was old, and I helped her out as well, and paid her travel fare. I'm not saying these things to say I'm a good person. I'm saying these things to say that these are some of the things that the Creator and the Divine gifts me with. I had an opportunity to help a woman, women. Like, I could have just went about my day and thought about myself all day. It could have been a day like that where I just, or like I said, my clan is currently going through some serious trials right now, and I could have just put my focus there. And sometimes when you're going through things, you lose sight of your own value. You lose sight of your own purpose. But to have opportunity where that can be reinforced, your value, what you bring, what you do, those things can be reinforced. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. So I am thankful for the opportunity to radiate through charity instead of being stuck in a trap of greed. Diligence, one of the 7 noble truths. I think we're on our 3rd truth by now. I told myself before I began, I would write the 7 truths down on an envelope or something, a piece of paper, to make sure I stayed on it. So I'm just gonna, as I'm speaking, I'll try to remember, which ones I did. But diligence is the antithesis, or really the antidote to inertia. When you apply will and rhythm, your will within a rhythm, until your motion becomes momentum, you have diligence. So every repetition engraves a magnetic groove, like within a record. Whether that repetition be repetitive ritual, repetitive exercise, repetitive study, repetitive affirmations, repetitive prayer. That's what you do. When those things are done with constancy, they become conduits, excuse me, for higher influence. That's how you open yourself up. When people say, "Oh man, I spoke to God and I didn't hear anything." Well, how many times you did it? I did it a couple of times. It doesn't work that way. It's your diligence that now starts to clear out the channel. It's like if you've ever had to create a new groove in a piece of wood, or for those of you who work in the dental field, you've had to create a root canal, you filing and filing, you're creating a tract. You're filing out a tract in order to lay something new. You don't just, and a lot of times when you're working in certain things, you're using different size files. Like when you're woodworking, you might start with a coarse file that's a little larger, and you go smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, depending on what you're doing, or vice versa. You may go small and go larger, 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 right? But there's a diligence. When you're neglectful, when you neglect affirmations, when you neglect your prayer, when you neglect your exercise, you neglect your study, your power dissipates. That's how you dissipate power. One of the greatest ways to dissipate anyone's power is through neglect. Like we say in certain arenas, if you don't use it, you lose it. Power works in the same sort of ideology. So therefore, if you fix an hour of practice and guard it, and you guard it as a sacred vow, over time, the subtle bodies align to that hour. So even fatigue will respect it. If you say every day at 7 a.m., I affirm, I study, I affirm, I pray, whatever it is, again, you do. In ANU, we affirm. We don't pray as much. Praying is petitioning. But what we do is we sit on the promises and the truths of the divine and the creator. So we affirm if something is happening. That's why it's important when you're praying. Some people, they pray a little better than others because they can pray armed with the promises of the creator, right? Like if you pray and say, I've never seen the righteous forsaken nor poor begging for bread, that's not really accurate. That's what David said. That's not necessarily what the creator said, but you hear people say that all the time. I've never seen the righteous forsaken. Okay, that David never saw the righteous forsaken, right? So, but when you're armed with actual truth, or when Job says the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, that's not actually accurate. Elohim gave, and the Elohim, Shaitan took away. So it was given and taken by two different entities. So when you're armed with actually knowing, if that's the book that you're working out of, right? If you actually know the scriptures, then, you can arm yourself with affirmations like, well, I know you said this, so I'm affirming that. You said that, so I'm affirming that. As opposed to, I hope you do this, I hope you do that, please do this, please, won't he do it? Stuff like that. So when you consecrate that time, if you say every day at 7, this is what I'm going to do, even if I'm tired, I'm a little frustrated, angry, tummy ache, headache, whatever it is, what happens is that the vital forces start to gather themselves to your assistance at that time because you've consecrated it. You've made this the holy hour, or, me and my friends, we used to call that the God hour, 7 a.m., 7 p.m., because in our supreme mathematics, 7 is God. So, the God hour, right? I do a lot during the God hour, it's just a time that stuck with me. The God hour, knowledge, wisdom, or the hour of completion, or noon. Those two times are what I work with mainly. 7 a.m., 7 p.m., 12 p.m., even 12 a.m. Right? I just, those are numbers I flow with. Right? And you have your own. Yours might be 3, or every day at 3, I'm going to do this. Every day at 4, even if it's just a word of thanks. No matter what's going on at 4 p.m., I'm going to say thank you, and then just go back to what I'm doing, whatever it is. But it's through that diligence and that consistency, that now the subtle bodies around you align themselves to that time. One of the other noble virtues is patience. Patience is not passivity, as many people imagine. Patience is the transforming of heat into light. That's what patience is. Anger, frustration, rage, these are just premature discharges of energy. Yeah, when you, when you discharge your energy too soon, before it's supposed to be discharged, before the energy has properly been developed, it will always or often discharge as anger. It will often discharge as frustration. That's why when you're finished expressing your anger and finished expressing your frustration, especially if it isn't righteous anger, you have nothing left. You just, because you just released all of the energy that you were supposed to transform into light. So when you hold those energies in silence, you refine those energies. Refine them. Imagine the emotional fire that you have, whatever you're going through, whatever's happening, you have this emotional fire. And you imagine that emotional fire is descending down into your solar plexus, your solar chakra, and it becomes cooled and it becomes clarified by your breath. So it's sitting there in your solar chakra and you start breathing evenly. You might even put your hand on your solar plexus. And what happens is that rage, it starts to cool and you start to gain clarity. When one learns to wait without tension, intuition begins to supply solutions. And that force, that emotion or rage or frustration had, you'll realize that it could have never, ever reached those solutions. Frustration never yields solutions, ever. Anger never yields solutions. It's the cooling of those energies that yields light, and that illumination, that light now gives you the solutions that you could have never reached through those others. So patience is an active receptivity. It's not just sitting and I'm gonna keep my mouth shut, I'm gonna be patient, I'm gonna shut up, but you're sitting there with tension and anger. It's active receptivity. It's when the lower will surrenders to the higher command. And once it surrenders, the higher can command. We see this often in companies. We see this often in homes. When the lower just refuses, all it wants to do is fight. It wants the position of the higher without taking on the responsibility of the higher. I have experienced that in homes. I have experienced that myself. You want to wear my crown. You want to be the king, but you don't want the responsibilities of the king. Whether it's spouses or children. Sometimes children get to that place. They want your job, but they don't want the burden of your job. But when the lower, those who you preside over, who you're responsible for, when they surrender, now you can command properly and do your job that you were ordained and tasked to do. Take care of those who are under you. One of the other 7 noble virtues is kindness. Kindness is where you have this phenomenon where you observe that kindness unites, where envy divides. Kindness is the expansion of the heart center, right? Each sincere gesture or each sincere act of goodwill, it increases the circulation of prana energy throughout that region. So whereas hostility constricts, benevolence, it dilates, right? So you can feel it physically. You can feel it. You can feel when you move out of a hostile place and you're being benevolent or you're being kind. What happens in those moments often, your chest softens and your shoulders sort of release. You can see it. Kindness is a form of bioenergetic or I would say bioenergetic hygiene is kindness. It maintains the health of the astral body, which is so important, and it retains the health of the astral body through relational harmony. You see, it's important to be kind, man. I remember that was a question that a lot of times people would ask, like, what do you look for in a woman? That's my number one: kindness. Are you kind? Kindness is a huge turn on for me. And when it's authentic. You know when someone's being performative and they're putting on a show, or maybe there wasn't a show, so they got to come back and tell you, you know what I did today, you know, or guess what happened, and they're always the hero. But true, authentic kindness is, you could tell. A lot of times you could tell in the subtle things that a person does that they don't even realize that they're a kind person. I remember when I was couldn't have been any older than 16, maybe 15, 16. It's interesting where you can get understanding from at times where you may not expect it. Uh, there was a prophetess. Her name was, I'm going to say her name, Prophetess Delagal. That was her last name. Really cool elder sister. She's come to the barbershop I used to work at. I knew her sister. I knew her daughter, excuse me. Her daughter went with one of my closest friends at the time. And that turned out not good. You would have never known her mother who she was in church. Like, she was a big church, figure. She had a short haircut, and the back was trimmed and shaved. So she used to come in and get like the back of her hair done. And she was very close to the owner of the barbershop, another young man who was in church as well. But they had like a mother-son kind of relationship. And she used to always call me man of wisdom. From the first day she met me, man of wisdom. But I never said anything to her. I never spoke. Really, she would come in. I would say, "Oh, good afternoon, Prophetess Delagal," or good, whatever. I'm cutting my hair. I'm doing my thing. I'm making my money. And I remember one time the owner, I won't say his name, but he's like a big brother to me, even to this day. Well, I made him my big brother. I adopted him. All the brothers there were. He was like, "Yo, why you keep?" Because everybody called me you. He said, "Why you keep calling you man of wisdom?" Like this. Because at the time I'm a teenager. The owner was 20-something years old, and then 30-something year old another brother. Everybody in there was grown. I'm still in high school. And she said, "He'll find out one day. He doesn't know why I call him that either, but he'll know one day. He'll find out." And that stuck with me, because she didn't have a nickname for anybody else. She would always see me, man of wisdom. I was I was on the threshold of manhood at that time, But you get wisdom sometimes. People see things in you. Maybe, I don't know what it was, or maybe it was just her divine eye. I don't know. I never asked her. I haven't seen her in probably, man, I don't know, man, decades. I can't even count the years. It's been so long. Last time she saw me, I had probably a fro with a part through my eyebrow and another part in my hair. That's how long ago that was. And then there was another guy, Dave, brother Dave. I remember Dave. Dave was a white guy, and he had a black wife, and they used to come to the barbershop. I don't know why he would come to our shop, but he used to come to our shop. He's a real nice guy too, man. Short guy, I remember. And his wife was pregnant at the time. And I don't know, he was just one of those kind of guys where, because where our shop was, it wasn't like, we kind of in the hood a little bit. But sometimes you have certain kind of white guys that it doesn't matter. I've grown up with some guys I knew like that. Some white guys would come to the hood, and it's just like, and it's a different time today. Now you can walk wherever you want to walk. But I grew up in an era where certain neighborhoods, certain people could not walk through. Even me, myself, would have a certain problem if I went through certain areas where it was controlled by Italians, or this was a big area where maybe there were Irish people. And, I had an incident before when as a youth, me and a bunch of my friends walking past an Irish bar in Yonkers back in the days and getting chased up out of Yonkers. And I remember running to, right, for anybody knows Yonkers, right past Getty Square, there was that McDonald's, I think was that long street. When you're coming off of 87, you go all the way down the hill. And I don't even know that McDonald's is still there. And there was a cop in there, and we ran in there and we said, yo, because these were grown men chasing us, man. They had bats and tire irons. And I remember we ran in there and we told the cop what was happening. He's like, yo, these men are chasing us, boom, boom. And he was like, well, where y'all from? He was like, yo, Mount Vernon. And he said, well, keep running that way. You'll make it. That's the era I grew up in, right? So, yeah, Dave would come to the shop, man. And I remember he would always say, every time he'd see me, he'd greet me, he'd give me so much respect, And I remember he was getting his hair cut one day and he said, you has very kind eyes. He has very kind eyes. I ain't never heard nothing like that before. I never heard that. I was like, okay, the heck does that mean? I'm older now. I'm older than what he was at that time. And I understand some of what older people see in younger people. At that time and at that age, you just record it in your mental bank and you just keep on, you just keep on cutting hair and, making those flat tops, flat and crisp at that era. Just make sure that high top, that fade is blended right, and the points, your line gonna be, that's all I'm on, But I remember Dave saying that he's like, yeah, you has very kind eyes. So where things end up, right? Who would have known I would have come to a place in life where people would actually come to me seeking wisdom. And I would be approachable because of the kindness that you've shown. So there's a relational harmony that you keep as a divine through your kindness, your willingness and your openness to serve, to show charity, to show love. It keeps your etheric self in harmony with the cosmos, because the cosmos does the exact same thing for us. It shows us the same kind of grace and kindness. So for you to behave in a different way would strike a disharmonic chord with the cosmos. One of the noble truths is humility. Humility is like a cornerstone virtue. It's really where so many things begin with humility. It's a keystone in all of this. Where you have pride isolates you from other people. Humility reconnects you to people. Your consciousness operates, or I would say the universal consciousness, it doesn't operate from you. It operates through you. Okay. So it's just like the sun. The sun is not bragging every day that I'm light. Look at me. I'm light. Look at me. Ha ha ha. It just shines. It simply shines. So each dawning, if you offer a very brief invocation, not my personal desire, but the order of the higher will be done through this vessel. Simple, right? So when you can invoke that level of remembrance, it clears the mental sheath and allows guidance to pass through unobstructed, which is what we want. It's no different than when you're eating food. You don't want to eat things that clog your system, right? Your system is not a septic tank. You don't want your stomach or your intestines or your colon to be a warehouse for waste. You want to eat things, you want your body to grab what it needs, and then you want the waste product gone in a relatively short amount of time. You don't want to eat beats on a first day or Yom Rishon or Sunday, and you still have red stuff coming out you on Yom Kamashi, or Thursday, or fifth day, right? So you want to allow guidance to pass through you unobstructed. It's very important. So with those 7 forces, remember they operate together. Each corresponds to a psychic center within you. Chastity purifies the generative base. Temperance steadies your abdomen, right? Charity expands the heart. Diligence fortifies the solar plexus. And patience, it stabilizes your throat. Your patience, your kindness, it refines your surrounding aura, and your humility opens up your kether, or opens up your crown, you see. So when all of those things are active, the human system becomes a living temple. That's how you create a temple within yourself. You have light descending from above, and you have your will ascending from below. You see, light's coming from above, will is coming from below, and they're both meeting at the heart. They're meeting at your heart in equilibrium. That's the goal, right? So there's centering that you can do when you awake. Before there's speech, before there's you anything, you focus awareness into your spine. I would suggest you do this when you get up. It could be before or after you wash, or you might do your affirmation. So I'm not saying before you move out the bed. If you can, fine. Trace the breath from the base of your spine, your spine to your brow. Just trace your breath. Breathe into that spine. And just trace the breath from the base of your spine to your brow, and affirm balance. Affirm balance. Then when you get to your midday, so for me, again, I wake up pretty early. I'm not a dawning person, but I do get a very, very early jump on my day just because I'm restless. There's a lot of things I want to do in life. But 7 is still my God hours when I'll make my first, because I mix a lot throughout the day. So I'll make my early dawning. But then it's around 7 I'm doing. So around 4 something, and then around 7 something. But then there's a midday, and midday, noon, we'll say. Even that's not technically the middle of the day, but let's, roll with me. I do a midday observation, and I would urge you to do it before you react. Always note your emotional temperature throughout the day. Always note it. If heat begins to rise, slow your breath. Slow your breath. Sometimes the heat will arise when you do your midday check-in. You'll ask yourself, man, how am I doing? And then it's like things will come to your remembrance, and you start getting angry. Slow your breath. If you start to feel a heaviness begin to creep in, stand up. If you're able to, stand up, stretch, recirculate the energy throughout your body. If you start feeling heaviness, any kind of stretch you get, even if it's just your neck, anything. It could be shoulder rolls, stretch your fingers out. I usually advise, and I practice, stretch everything. Stretch everything, right? So what I mean by that, I stretch my toes. I stretch my fingertips. I stretch my eyes. So for instance, you won't catch it on camera, but if I'm stretching my head to the left, right? This is not a full stretch, but you get it. While I'm stretching to the left, I'm stretching my eyes to the left too. If I go to the right, I'm stretching my eyeballs all the way to the right. Stretch everything, right? Stretching my neck forward. Ooh, nice pop. Nice pop. Stretching my neck backwards, forward, right? That's midday. It doesn't like literally takes like a minute, you know. I have a longer stretch routine. I do sometimes. It takes about, well, I time it to a song. So uh you do a better song. It's a Mobb Deep song. Don't listen to Mobb Deep. But I think that song is it's less than 4 minutes, like 3 minutes 45 seconds, something like that. But you don't have to do all that. You could literally just stretch for 10 seconds, right? Just do a quick stretch, recirculate your energy, right? Then in the evening, I do another review. I rewind from the day, right? From in and then to the beginning. I identify where virtue was expressed and where distortion returned in my life, right? Very important. It's a review I do, you know, because sometimes you know, every good act is not returned with goodwill. For those of us who work for the community, you know, I have been doing this work really, really, really long time. And as I've said so many times, it's generally a thankless work. Generally. I used to say it just is a thankless work, but I'm not going to say that anymore because I have to be honest. There are times where um, the ANU community, you know what? Heck, because you're going to see this video. So just now I paused. Um, I'm recording. I don't have a camera. I use my phone. And as I was talking about, I was going to say the ANU community does actually express thanks time to time. You know, I do things for different members, or even if I don't, well, I think I'm always doing something, but someone's always like, thank you, Chief. I really appreciate it. Do you need anything? You know, so I have to say, I can't say what I used to say anymore. You know, I used to always be like, man, nobody cared. Like, you know, I would just get used a lot. And I still do. But I have people who balance some of that. Now, what just happened? And sister, you tend to watch pretty regularly, so I think you're gonna see this. I didn't read it, but I just saw the notification just popped up on the screen where a sister who does watch the segments. I feel like that might have been Facebook. You just messaged me on or IG and said, "I was just thinking about you, Chief, and I'm just checking in. Shalom." And I couldn't read the rest of it because I'm recording right now, but it just popped up on the phone. So that's an example, right? That was something good that returned. I don't know what the message says, so maybe only the top was good, and you know she's gonna curse me out in the bottom. I don't know, but I just thought I would mention it because it was. I think it was very purposeful that the universe and the Most High coordinated that would happen right when I'm talking about what's returned to you. Okay, but sometimes distortions are returned too. So sometimes you express virtue and a distortion is a return. Sometimes it's your own distortion. Sometimes it's your own distortion. Don't judge when that happens. Whether another person or another situation returns a distortion or you distort, you know, just make a note of the current. The current is more important than how you judge the situation. We always think our judgment is, you know, we sometimes move with the solipsistic sort of mindset where whatever I think or believe or feel, that's what it is. It's got to be that, and nothing else matters outside of that. And that's a very harmful and destructive and very entitled way of moving through the world. But don't judge. Just simply make a note of the current. So now you begin to create this nightly ledger. And that nightly ledger reforms your habits and it begins to strengthen your causal memory. I did this, that happened. I did that, that happened. If you could do that for 21 days, after 21 days of observation, the magnetic structure begins to shift. Vitality rises. Serenity begins to stabilize. You know, each virtue, it adds its sort of hue to your auric field, right? Each virtue has its own color. Some of us can see them. Some of you cannot. It's fine. You don't have to. Um, I more feel. I see it, but I interpret feelings. My empathic gift allows me to feel things at such an intense level that I can hear and see, through the density of the object. So uh, when someone is radiating with a certain virtue, it does add a color. You'll often see people who are pale blue in their auric field. It's because they have a certain measure of patience, like a mother. People who are very charitable, you'll see rose gold. People who enact a good amount of temperance, you'll see emerald green, so forth and so on. So together, all of those sort of virtues, they form now this luminous egg, if you can imagine, and that's a shield, and it's a shield through which now the higher influence or the deeper influence may safely operate. You see, when you read different holy writings, you read about the preparation of temples, the preparation of shrines, and even this idea of like, I won't, unless it's prepared properly, I will not be there. If it's not cleaned and tended to as it ought be, I will not make an appearance. You want to invoke me and you want me to come through, then the temple has to be right. There is I remember reading Israel Regardie speaking about that, and he called that the becoming obedient to the holy guardian angel. And what that basically is, it's the alignment of your human mechanism with the divine intelligence. You know, and when you do that, now you can get your messages clearly and properly, and a divine intelligence can work with you. So virtue is not a sentiment. Somebody say, "Oh, you're so kind. Oh, you're so charitable. Oh, you're so patient." Or whatever. It's not a sentiment. Virtue is actually a functionality. It's different functions within your internal and spiritual and causal machine. It's how your lower nature becomes transparent to the higher nature. So these are important functions. It's not optional. I could be kind, but no, you ain't kind. You're not going to see the face of your creator. So you don't want to seek perfection. Perfection is stagnation, or the idea that, well, I did this right, I did that right, I did that right. No, you want to seek rhythm. It's a big difference. Don't seek perfection, seek rhythm. So when distortion reappears, you treat it as feedback. Don't treat it as failure. Treat it as feedback. You're tuning an instrument. You're not erasing a flaw. When I pick up my guitar, my guitar, usually the strings are out of tune. Why are they out of tune? Because I use it. Even after you tune it, if a lot of times in the midst, some of you go to concerts, you don't see it. But in between, sometimes you might go to a concert, in between the artists, they get up, they tell a story, or a comedian comes out in between sets, and you see the musicians walk off stage and they come back. They retune their instruments. The drummer's got his tuning key. The drummer's making sure that the toms and everything and the kick drum, everything is in the notes that they're supposed to be. The percussionist is tuning up their drum skins. The bassist is retuning. The guitarist is retuning. You might have analog keyboards on set. They sound great, but they drift out of tune. You're retuning back to 440 hertz, making sure everything's in tune. Why? Because I just finished using it, and as I'm using it, it stretches and it expands, and it contracts, and the strings heat up and they move around, and now my sweat is on them or on the drum skins, and the note changes. And I don't, it doesn't mean I throw the drum out, doesn't mean I throw the guitar out. I retune it. It's a relationship and a personal connective relationship to the creator. It's the same way. It goes out of tune the more you use it. So every day that you adjust, it sharpens your resonance. That's why you want to do these things every single day. That's where your diligence comes in. Eventually, the vices that you have, whether again they be your addictions, they be your anger, they be your self-loathing, your suicidal thoughts, they begin to lose their electrical charge because the current now has found a cleaner path. The electrical current wants a clean path to go. It doesn't want what we call dirty energy or dirty electricity. This is where like you might live in a place you get brownouts often, or you get blackouts even, you know. So what it means is when you're reaching deep down inside, it's not moral penance. It's electrical housekeeping. It's electrical housekeeping, drawing power from the root and redefining it through the mind. The root was at the base of your spine, your root chakra. You're drawing up power from it, like when you're dragon breathing. Then you're taking your mind up here to redefine that power or refine it, excuse me. And you redistribute that power through the heart into the world. You practice these things quietly. And let me tell you something that's really important. Guard your rhythm. Guard your rhythm. I'm telling you, as someone who spent a lot of time, two things, in the musical world and a lot of times in the martial sciences world. When you're playing music, you want to guard. For me, especially because of the instruments that I primary on. I play keyboards and horns and a bunch of other stuff, as you can hear on the music that I put out. But my primary instrument is bass guitar. That's my root, right? You can't be an off rhythm bass player. You will never get any work. No one will call you for any gigs. No one will call you for any studio sessions. There's two people who have to have impeccable timing in a band: the drummer and the bassist. And the drummer and the bassist, I've always been like the closest friends with every drummer that I ever played in a band with. Because you develop a quiet relationship. Sometimes it's not quiet, depending on the drummer. The drummer, I've worked with drummers, they shouting at you while you playing, nah, you too busy. Sometimes you might be playing and you get overexcited, you're doing a little bit too much. And you have a drummer that like, tone it down, bring it down, tone it down, but you develop a relationship and you guard each other. You might be working with a drummer and something happens to his kick pedal. That's the boom, boom. That's that strong sound you hear from a drum, the kick drum. Maybe his pedal breaks or something in the middle of the song, so there's no kick. So you got his hi-hat and snare. So you might take your bass and hit it and give it a thump. Doom, doom, da thump, da thump, while he's fixing his pedal. Hurry up. Da thump, da thump, da thump, da thump. You're guarding, because when they're moving, we got to keep them, don't mess up, don't mess that up. Keep the rhythm going, right? So you learn to do the same for yourself, and you become very sensitive when situations come that break up your rhythm. It could be a job, it could be a spiritual experience or religious experience. It could be a relationship, friendly, not so much as speaking about intimate relationships, it could be a platonic relationship where now your rhythm is broken. You have 7 lights within you. As we talked about the 7 virtues of the 7 deadly sins. Those 7 virtues are lights that they burn steady and they burn clear. So you got to tune into how your vessel must remain balanced. that your will must remain steadfast, and your inner temple should remain a place that's filled with the living radiance of the one light. So once you get into that space in your guarding rhythm, and you're recognizing, man, I'm always radiating this charity that I have in me, this giving, it causes me to radiate. This humility that I have in me causes me to connect with people that maybe I would not have connected with. And it's better to be this way than to be self-centered, self-absorbed, greedy, but it's better to give, as they say, than to receive, although it's circulation. It's better to receive and give, but each one has its place, but it's better to respect the rhythm of the circulation of give and take. But when you're contracted always in greed and you never expand and radiate in charity as consistently as you do with your taking, because some people will do something for you once in a while or say, no, I did something, and it's something they did months ago or years ago, but you can make a note like, no, but I see you every day taking. You're taking every single day, and then you're recalling giving here and there. No, that's not circulation. That's not circulation. That's like always taking in deep breaths and then just letting out a little bit. You're going to pass out, right? So there has to be a steady, even rhythm of all of these things. Even like I said, when you're eating, breathe steady. When you're speaking, breathe steady. When you're listening, especially, breathe steady, breathe even. Okay. And remember Iwa. It's instincts, will, aspiration. This is your character, you see. But you have to balance those things for the light, the higher light body, the macabre, to actually work through you. If not, you're on your own, man. If you're not making yourself a temple, how is anything going to reside in it of a higher, cleaner, more purified dimensional nature? How is it going to come into this dimension and work through you when you're repressing anger and frustration and tension, and you're not even making any real sincere effort to transmute those things into light, into creative force? Like I said, even with chastity, it's the more chaste someone is, the more potent their sexual energy is and their life force energy is. This is why we speak about the Virgin Mary. I'll break that down at some point to you one day, but you're going to come to understand it doesn't mean that she never had sex before. That's not what it meant to be a virgin. Didn't just mean that she was young. That's what you're thinking. It meant something else. But in order to contain and refine that life force and energy, we must be chaste. We must practice moderation. Moderation is our rhythm. It's our metronome that we feed and we feel through our diaphragm. We must respect that. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. This Yom Shani, or Monday, or second day, I have a work that'll be released, Escaping the Ahab and Jezebel Cycle. I will be sharing some more information about that coming forth, but it's a good book that I wrote. Yeah, it's a solid work. If you haven't checked out the Jezebel series on this channel, I urge you to check it out to get an understanding of it. But I'm not just speaking about Ahab and Jezebel in relationships, but also within the community and also within workplaces, how it plays out. Sometimes you might have a supervisor who's an Ahab, and you might have a coworker who's a Jezebel. And that we're not talking about male and female here. These are spirits that could be male or female, or male or females can possess them. It's important to understand. A lot of times we abscond people from their own accountability by saying, "Oh, they were possessed by a demon." People are not always possessed. Sometimes people are possessing. They possess that spirit. They want that spirit. How many women have I counseled who have weak males as husbands, And they say, yeah, he won't make any decisions. And I'll say that's because that's what you wanted. That's what you sought out. You looked for someone who was weak, and they admitted, yeah, you're right. I know. I knew it. I could tell. You didn't want anyone who was going to question you. You wanted to be in total control, Jezebel energy. So you went and looked for an Ahab. You possessed the spirit of Jezebel as opposed to being possessed by. So, you know, this text will help you to kind of discern the difference and, most importantly, how to escape it, because it's very harmful to our children. It's very harmful to our mindset. It breaks you down. It keeps you in a constant place of anxiety, constantly in a place of anxiety, raises the blood pressure, which can now lead to a myriad of other health issues. Okay. So definitely check that out when it comes out. Of course, it'll be on all platforms before y'all ask, because like, we're going to find your books. Where do you find every book in the world? It'll be there, you know, and a bunch of other places too, that it'll be distributed at. All right. So definitely check that out. There'll be a Kindle version and a paperback version as well. And then after that text, I got another one coming right behind it, that for those of you who are really interested in different models and variations of wealth building, you'll definitely appreciate these, you know, and these are all under the Growth and Dynamics imprint, you know, my organizational development and business coaching service that I do as well. So that's another thing. But it's Sabbath, so we're not going to be talking about too much of that. But I just wanted to share about the book itself, the Ahab and Jezebel book. All right. You'll enjoy it, I'm sure. And remember, there's always a bunch of free offerings on the ANU Life Global website. And when you sign up for the mailing list, which usually the link is in these segments, you can get the Shekinah instructional as well for free. All right. You get a link to that. So, you know, you have the Al Shabbat one that I provided for you, the mikveh one that also is on the site for free, how to do your own mikveh. But then you also have the Shekinah one as well that you can get through signing up through the newsletter, and the ANU way and the ANU glossary. So there's a bunch of free stuff that you can also enjoy and grow from, just like these segments. All we ask is that you make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, stuff like that. It's the only suggested offering when it comes to these segments. All right. So I want to thank you for tuning in, and thank you for your time and your patience and your love. Thank you so much for your love. All right. And I love you too. All right. Until such time, I'm Chief Yuya signing off. Shalom Aleichem.